Hi. Okay, so we are live with, we have our country director for CARE South Sudan, Fred McCray, is live in Nairobi. And we're just going to have a quick discussion with Fred just about what the past few days have been like in South Sudan. South Sudan erupted into uh, severe violence over the weekend when they should have been celebrating their 5th year of independence. Um, and so, Fred, maybe you can just kind of start with walking us through, like, what happened uh, when this violence broke out. Can you kind of paint us a picture of what happened?
Sure. It all started Thursday night. I know it's been repeated in the media that the violence started on Friday, but actually started Thursday. There was an engagement of government soldiers and opposition soldiers. Um, Not quite sure what the trigger was, but it resulted in gunfights and firefights all around the city. And so that went on for about 2 hours on Thursday night. And that was pretty startling because it seemed to kind of come out of nowhere, happen very suddenly. And then Friday morning, it was quiet. Friday afternoon and early evening, it was quiet. And then about 8 o'clock Friday night, the fighting started again, but this time it was heavier. You know, it was small arms fire as well as heavy arms fire. So it just the fighting was massive. And so there was just kind of a sense of panic. Everybody went on lockdown. They just kind of took shelter, not really knowing what was going on. And then Saturday morning there was fighting, but it was a little lighter. It did go on throughout the day, and then in the early evening it got quiet. And I think all of us kind of thought maybe this was the end of it. Maybe things would get better. We're going to start to quiet down. And actually, Sunday morning, early Sunday morning, things were relatively quiet. And then probably about 10 o'clock Sunday, that's when the really heavy fire started. Heavy fire, heavy arms, mortars, tank fire, helicopter gunships. It went on for most of the. It was pretty terrifying. In my past work experiences, I've worked in places like Afghanistan, and I've seen some conflict before, but nothing like what we saw on Sunday. It was just intense, and it was scary.
Wow. So yeah, can you tell us what's the status? How is the CARE staff?
Right now, the staff in Juba have been affected like everybody else. Two of our staff members had to actually leave their homes to get away from the fighting. And unfortunately, that a lot of people in the city were affected by that because the fighting kept moving around the city. We had one staff member whose house was destroyed, so now he's looking for shelter for him and his family, and we're working to support him. But the city it's been devastated. I mean, there's been a lot of damage. There's a lot of heavy fire, a lot of artillery fire. Like I mentioned, a helicopter gunship fire. A lot of buildings have been knocked down. The city, you can definitely see the effects of the fighting. It was very heavy fighting, very intense, and so it's left a big mark on the city. And like you mentioned, this weekend was supposed to be of South Sudan's independence, but just kind of speaks to how sad kind of the state of affairs are in South Sudan. That at a time when people should be celebrating, they're really hiding and running for their lives.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit more about what the potential impacts of this could be on the people if this conflict continues?
Well, it's going to be devastating because before the conflict, South Sudan was already in a very kind of desperate situation in terms of food security. The civil conflict has been going on, and a result of that is that over 2 million people have been displaced from their homes, and most South Sudanese are small-scale farmers. And so when they've been displaced from their homes and have to leave their homes looking for safety, that means they aren't planting, they aren't growing their own food, which they normally would. They've gone looking for shelter, looking for safe places to live. And so that makes them more dependent on humanitarian assistance, more dependent on having to buy food in the market. But unfortunately, the economy is completely collapsed. The official inflation rate in South Sudan is 295%. It makes it the second highest in the world. And so you have a situation here where people now to buy food from the market simply can't afford the food that's on the shelves because it's been priced out of their reach. And so you have a situation where dependent on humanitarian assistance just to meet their basic needs. And so you look at that kind of economic situation, desperate economic situation, and then put the reintroduction of large-scale conflict on top of that, and people are desperate. You know, they're desperate to one, get away from the conflict and just find some safety, but then also desperate to try to figure out how they're going to feed their families.
Gosh, so you're painting a pretty grim picture for South Sudan. You know, what is it going to take to change things there?
I think it's going to take real concerted pressure from the international community to hold both sides of the conflict accountable to implementing this peace agreement. You know, the peace agreement was signed in August of last year, and there was a level of cautious optimism around that maybe South Sudan would be able to move forward. It was kind of months ago, the former opposition leader, Dr. Riek Machar, returned to Juba and took up his position as first vice president, and that led to the formation of the government of transitional government of national unity. And so once again, there was this cautious optimism that South Sudan moved towards peace and development, but that hasn't happened. And sadly, almost right after Dr. Machar took up his position as first vice president, in parts of the country that had traditionally been peaceful, areas like the Greater Equatorias, areas like the Greater Bahr Ghazal, in particular the town of Wau, which just saw conflict 2 weeks ago, which had previously been very peaceful, one of the biggest commercial centers in South Sudan, was suddenly, in the midst of heavy fighting that saw 70,000 people displaced from their homes, fleeing to UN sites looking for safety. And so you have a situation here where things have been building and building, and so now eventually, unfortunately, and it seems like we're in a state of full-scale war again, where the peace process has completely collapsed. And so it's the international community to put pressure on both sides, both parties to this conflict, to hold them accountable and really enforce this peace agreement if South Sudan is ever going to get back on track, and the South Sudanese people are ever going to really get to enjoy the life that they deserve.
Yeah. Well, I know that you had to go through the painful process of evacuating because things had gotten so dangerous. Can you tell us a little bit about, what that was like, what it was like, trying to get to the airport?
It was hard. Honestly, it was hard. It's the toughest decision that you have to make as a country director. Definitely, for me, it's the toughest decision I've ever had to make. I've been in South Sudan for over 2 years. I'm familiar with the situation here in the country. I'm committed to South Sudan. All of other humanitarian actors are. CARE has been in South Sudan since 1993, so we have a long-standing commitment to this country to provide assistance and support. And so, I didn't want to evacuate, but it just got to a point where the situation was so dangerous in Juba, that my ultimate responsibility as the country director is to evacuate my team from Juba, and I had to make that call. It was not an easy one. We still have operations going on in other parts of the country where conflict has not reached yet, such as Unity State, but we did shut down our main office in Juba on Tuesday morning, along with other NGOs. Early Tuesday morning, we formed a humanitarian convoy, basically made a run for the airport, and got on a charter, and we had to pull out. And so it was not easy. It was a very somber tone, at the airport, and everybody was sad that it had come to this. But we knew we had to take this window to evacuate and regroup and get ourselves together and decide when it was safe for us to go back. We're hopeful right now that things seem to have settled down a bit, and so my team and I are looking to go back in on Monday to restart our operations. So we're looking forward to that. It's a lot of work to do, and we want to get back to it.
All right. So what is CARE doing right now? You said that we've had to suspend some of our programming, but we're still operating that life-saving program that's so crucial right now. Can you say a little bit about what we're doing to respond?
Sure. In Unity State, we still have, with our health programming, at CARE, we manage the Periang State Hospital. So we're continuing to operate that. We also have nutrition programming that focuses on malnourished children under 5 and malnourished pregnant and lactating women. So we provide and counseling on proper nutrition and nutritional intake. So that's still going on. And then we have nutrition operations inside the Bintu UN protection of civilian sites. And because of the conflict, there are actually more Bintu sites looking for shelter and for safety. And so we are scaling up our operations to meet that increased need there as well.
All right. So one last question before we go, because I know it's getting late there and you probably want to go to sleep soon. But what can, people that are watching this, like that, are seeing what's happening in South Sudan, what can they do to help?
Well, I think two things. One is to talk to your elected officials, your congressmen, your senators, talk to them about South Sudan, remind them about what's going on in South Sudan. I understand there may be a bit of frustration. The country is going through a very difficult political process, but I would hope that the international community, that the world doesn't let that get in the way of remembering the people of South Sudan that are suffering because of no fault of their own, who desperately still need support and still need our assistance and still need us to stand by them. And the other thing is that for us, for CARE, like I said, we're going back in on Monday. We're going to be scaling up our operation. The needs are immense, and so we're going to do everything we can. And so we would ask people to support us as we work to support the people of South Sudan. If they would go
Rose. Hello?
I'm here.
Okay. I think you were saying to go to care.org to donate to the response, right?
Yes.
All right.
We're broadcasting that, right? We're not doing that again, are we?
No, it's good. All right, so we'll let you go and go to sleep now, Fred. Thanks so much for that update. Stay safe. We're wishing you and the team the best over there, and I do hope you're able to get back into Juba and back to work with boots on the ground soon.
Thanks so much.
All right, bye.
Take care.